The acrid stench of smoke hung heavy in the chilly night air of Willow Creek, a quiet town nestled in the heart of suburban America. The roar of flames drowned out the shouts of frantic onlookers as the Willow Haven shelter, a sanctuary for disabled veterans, burned like a funeral pyre. Chief Federal Fire Investigator Robert Callahan, a grizzled man in his early 50s, stood at the edge of the chaos, his storm-gray eyes scanning the inferno. The red and blue lights of emergency vehicles cast eerie shadows across the collapsing structure, where once stood a beacon of hope for those who'd served their country. The fire wasn't just destructive, it was deliberate. Callahan knew at the moment he smelled the sharp, chemical tang beneath the burning wood. This was no accident. Someone had set this blaze with intent to destroy. Callahan, a 20-year veteran of the Army Corps of Engineers before joining the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, had seen his share of devastation. From industrial explosions to smoldering family homes, he understood fire's merciless nature, its physics, its chemistry, and the dark motives that sometimes fueled it. Tonight, he was in Willow Creek for a fire safety conference, a tedious affair of slideshows and stale coffee. He was set to deliver a keynote on arson detection the next morning. The irony wasn't lost on him as he watched Willow Haven crumble. When the local fire chief, Tom Bradley, called him to the scene, his voice taut with panic, Callahan knew he was stepping into something bigger than a routine blaze. "It went up like a torch, Bob," Bradley had said. "Too fast. Too hot. That meant accelerants. Lots of them." Across the street, huddled under blankets, the veterans watched their home burn. Their faces, lit by the fire's glow, carried the weight of trauma war scars deepened by this new betrayal. Callahan's jaw tightened. These were men and women who'd already faced firestorms abroad, only to see their sanctuary devoured at home. He approached the shelter's manager, James Harper, a wiry man with haunted eyes. "Everyone out, James?" Callahan asked, his voice steady despite the chaos. Harper nodded, shaken. "I think so. Captain John Matthews is doing a head count." "It happened so fast, Bob." They were asleep. Callahan's gut twisted. He glanced at Matthews, a towering figure in his late 70s, a decorated Vietnam vet, comforting a sobbing young woman. If anyone knew the heart of this place, it was Matthews. The fire's pattern told a story. Multiple ignition points, intense heat in specific areas, and the unmistakable scent of gasoline. This wasn't just arson, it was malice with a purpose. Callahan's mind raced, already piecing together a plan as firefighters battled the blaze. The shelter, a weathered Victorian on the edge of Willow Creek's affluent district, had long been a sore spot for some residents. While most of the town supported its mission housing 30 disabled veterans with physical and mental scars, a vocal minority wanted it gone. Leading the charge was Margaret Ellison, a wealthy widow in her late 50s, head of the Willow Creek Heritage Society. Her polished exterior and sharp tongue masked a ruthless agenda. Keep the town pristine, property values high, and undesirable elements out. Ellison had called the shelter an eyesore, claiming it brought instability to the neighborhood. Her petitions, lawsuits, and thinly veiled complaints about the veterans' presence had stirred tension for years. Callahan recalled a heated town council meeting he'd watched online while researching the area. Ellison, in a tailored suit, had lashed out when her latest bid to rezone the shelter failed. "This council will regret putting sentiment over the concerns of hard-working taxpayers," she'd snapped, her composure slipping to reveal raw venom. That moment stuck with Callahan. She was capable of more than words. By dawn, the flames were subdued, leaving a charred skeleton of Willow Haven. The veterans were relocated to the high school gym, a cold, inadequate refuge. Callahan took charge of the investigation, his federal credentials silencing any local pushback. His team from Quantico arrived, combing through the wreckage. They found alligator charring on beams, pooled burn marks, and traces of gasoline and industrial solvent hallmarks of a calculated arson. Near a broken window, Callahan spotted a melted plastic container, its label barely legible but unmistakable, a flammable solvent, bought recently. Interviews with the veterans painted a grim picture. Harper was racked with guilt, convinced he'd failed his residents. Matthews, steely despite his grief, spoke plainly. "Margaret Ellison's been after us for years, Bob. Petitions, fake health violations, you name it. She called us a blight on her perfect town." He paused, his voice low. Never a direct threat, but you could feel the hate. Another veteran, Sarah Lopez, a young woman with a limp and trembling hands, whispered about vandalism, get out message spray-painted on the shelter's fence days before. They hadn't reported it, fearing it would fuel Ellison's campaign. Callahan's suspicions zeroed in on Margaret Ellison. When he and a local detective, Mike Reynolds, visited her sprawling Victorian home, she greeted them with rehearsed sympathy. Those poor veterans, she said, her voice dripping with concern. That old building was a fire trap. I always worried about the wiring. Callahan's eyes narrowed. He hadn't mentioned wiring. Her slip was telling. The fire wasn't accidental, Mrs. Ellison, he said, watching her closely. We're investigating arson. Her eyebrow twitched, but she recovered quickly. Arson? Who would do such a thing? Her shock felt staged, her denial too polished. The investigation intensified. Callahan's team confirmed gasoline and solvent at multiple ignition points, designed for maximum destruction. The veterans, cramped in the gym, grew restless, their health deteriorating under the strain. Meanwhile, Ellison played the saint, announcing a donation to a relief fund she'd created a move Callahan saw as a cynical ploy to control the narrative. She gave interviews, lamenting the tragic fire while suggesting a new shelter be built far from Willow Creek's core. Her allies on the town council even blocked a plan to house the veterans in a vacant municipal building, claiming zoning issues. It was a cruel tactic to pressure the veterans into leaving. Then came a break. A local teen, an amateur photographer, had captured a grainy image of a luxury SUV matching Ellison's near the shelter an hour before the fire. Security footage from a nearby business later showed the same SUV speeding away post-ignition, its license plate clear. Confronted, Ellison admitted to driving that night, claiming insomnia. I often drive to clear my head, she said coolly. It means nothing. But Callahan wasn't buying it. His team dug deeper, uncovering a receipt from a hardware store for solvent and gloves, paid with a card linked to a shell company Ellison controlled. Store footage showed a woman disguised but with Ellison's build and a distinctive handbag making the purchase. Callahan knew he needed more to crack her. He suspected a proxy, someone she'd coerced into setting the fire. A disgruntled former employee, a landscaper named Pete Carter, came forward after federal protection was offered. He claimed Ellison had offered him cash to make the shelter uninhabitable. He'd refused but kept recordings of her veiled suggestions. It was enough to rattle her. Callahan arranged a meeting at the Emergency Operations Center, inviting Ellison and her slick lawyer, Edward Grant. She arrived confident, underestimating him. He laid out the evidence, the SUV photos, the receipt, the footage, the landscaper's claims. Her composure faltered, her face flushing as she clutched her handbag. Mrs. Ellison, Callahan said, his voice cutting like steel. You seem to think I'm a local cop you can intimidate. I'm Chief Federal Fire Investigator Robert Callahan, ATF, U.S. Department of Justice. This is a federal crime: arson, witness tampering, conspiracy. He slid his badge across the table. Your charade is over. Ellison froze, her lawyer stammering. The room's power shifted. She was no longer untouchable. The final blow came at a town council forum, packed with residents and veterans. Callahan presented his case. The arson's mechanics, the financial trail, the SUV's movements, the landscaper's testimony, and Ellison's attempt to frame a veteran with a false tip to a tabloid. This was no accident, he declared, his voice steady. Margaret Ellison orchestrated a campaign to destroy Willow Haven and its residents. Gasps filled the auditorium. Ellison leapt up, shouting denials, but Callahan produced a federal warrant. Agents escorted her out in handcuffs as the crowd erupted, veterans weeping with relief. Ellison's trial was swift. Convicted of arson, felony fire use, and obstruction, she was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison, her assets seized to rebuild Willow Haven. The town, shaken by her betrayal, rallied around the veterans. A national fundraising campaign, Rebuild with Valor, poured in millions. The new shelter rose modern, secure, with gardens and therapy spaces designed by the veterans themselves. Captain Matthews cut the ribbon at the opening, his words resonating. They tried to burn us down, but they only lit a fire for justice. Callahan's work led to the Valor Act, a federal law mandating better protections for veteran shelters. Willow Creek transformed, its residents volunteering at the new haven, their indifference replaced by pride. As the sun set on the rebuilt shelter, Callahan felt a quiet victory. Evil had been exposed, and from its ashes, hope had risen. What do you think about the injustice and cruelty exposed in this story? Have you seen similar acts of prejudice or malice in your community? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's discuss how we can stand against hatred and build stronger, more compassionate communities.